Well, good morning again. We are continuing our series that we started last week on the Old Testament book of Exodus. And so that is it's pretty easy to find, second book of the Bible. Genesis, go a little bit, Exodus. And we started this series last week. If you need a Bible, Marco will be around. You can raise your hand. You can borrow these for the service. You can also keep this Bible if you need one, but the text will also be on the screen behind me. Last week we began and we looked at chapter 1 and the first half of chapter 2. This week we're going to be picking up right where we left off. I'm going to read to us most of the second half of chapter 2. And then later we'll get into chapter 3. But I encourage you, be reading this on your own, because there is so much in here that we're not going to be able to really spend all the time we need together just on a Sunday. So be in this throughout the week. Be in prayer, be in reflection, and see what God has for you in these words. But may our ears be open as we hear the word of the Lord. Exodus chapter 2, starting in verse 11. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and saw their forced labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsfolk. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, he saw two Hebrews fighting, and he said to the one who was in the wrong, "Why do you strike your fellow Hebrew?" He answered, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "Surely the thing is known." When Pharaoh heard it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh. He settled in the land of Midian and sat down by a well. Skipping now to verse 23. After a long time, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned under their slavery and cried out. Out of their slavery, their cry for help rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Have you ever felt like, man, you just can't do anything right? That might be all of us, right? So you're in good company. Leaders throughout history, people who have accomplished great things, have always had a trail of failure. In 1894, an English teacher wrote on a teenage student's report card, "A conspicuous lack of success." The student's name was Winston Churchill. In fact, Churchill struggled so much that his dad worried that he would never earn a living as an adult. In 1902, the editor of the Atlantic Monthly rejected a collection of poems with a note, "Our magazine has no room for your vigorous verse." And the poet was Robert Frost. In 1905, the University of Bern rejected a proposal for a doctoral dissertation that they termed irrelevant and fanciful from a student named Albert Einstein. The great English writer and theologian G.K. Chesterton couldn't read until he was 8. And yet, these failures are not what these people are known for. We know these names, but not because of these failures. We know them because of what they have accomplished. We know them by their successes. This morning, we're going to look at this fascinating character, a central character in the biblical narrative, Moses. And we're going to be looking at a major failure in his life. And this isn't like some of these examples, it isn't just difficulty in like failing to do something. He experienced a moral failure as well as just failing to do what he needed to do. Failing to succeed at his purpose. So we're going to look at Moses because Moses is a wonderful example of how we can face failure and recover from them. Because every great person has experienced failure and have overcome them. But also, everyone who didn't succeed also experienced failure. Right? So we have to kind of figure out, what does it look like to be successful in the face of failure? What does that mean for us? Because certainly the answer isn't to avoid failure. That's going to happen. Your life experience has already taught you that failure is going to happen, but what we do next matters. Now, many of our failures aren't even bad necessarily, like Moses killing someone. But even when failure is bad, even when it is a moral downfall, we can learn that in Moses' case, our failure does not have to be final. That's one thing I want us to take away this morning from this lesson we can learn from Moses. Your failure does not have to be final. And in fact, your failure can be a catalyst for transformational growth. And that's what we find here with Moses. Last week, we introduced Moses in chapter 2, the beginning of chapter 2, with his unusual birth story. And as we think about the life of Moses, it's really convenient that we can break down Moses' life into 3 neat timelines. Right? And that's rarely the case, but for Moses it is. He has 3 very neat 40-year periods. Yes, 3 40-year periods. He lived to 120 years old. And each of these phases can be, I think, described roughly as a time of presumption, a time of preparation, and a time of productivity. His first 40 years could be described as a time of presumption, where he presumed to know things. Maybe he was a bit arrogant. And he spent his first 40 years in the stage of presumption. We will see later that in the next 40 years, he had a 40-year span of preparation. And then, of course, what he is most known for, the final 40 years, his years of productivity, where he led God's people out of slavery in Egypt through the wilderness and to the doorstep of the promised land. As I was thinking about Moses' life and these different phases that we can track Moses' life through, I was reminded of a graph I've seen that described the Dunning-Kruger effect. And if you don't know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, it's a psychological term, a social term that describes when someone's confidence in something is really high. You are really confident that you are capable of doing something hard, but your competence is actually down here. So it's a mismatch, right? You think you can do something, but actually what you can do is down here, right? This is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I'll give you an example. Maybe you'll be able to see this graph. Maybe I'll describe it to you. But this usually happens when you might learn something new. So new students going to college classes, and they're learning whatever it is, engineering or Bible school or you name it. And they learn something new. Or it might be you're working on a home project and you need to do some tiling. There's no reason Manu would laugh at that. I don't know why Manu would laugh. Or some drywalling. This is just a hypothetical, general example that anyone can relate to. And you're not a contractor, but you have YouTube. And you can YouTube how to tile. how to drywall and all of these things. And you watch these videos and they teach you how to do it. And you're like, and it looks so easy. They're doing the things, they got it, and they're putting it on the wall, and it looks beautiful. And so you get a list of all the tools. You go to Home Depot, you get all the tools. It's just, again, a general example. I know nothing of what this is like. And then you go and you start the process, and you feel confident, right? I got my YouTube education. I got all the tools. It looks so easy. I'm following step by step. What could go wrong? And then you're doing it, and you're like, wow, this is a lot messier than it is on TV. This is a lot harder. And it's like, and you step back at the final product, and you're like, that's not what it looks like on there. And it's like, you have high confidence, but your competence is not quite there yet. And so in this graph, if you can go back to the graph, you can see that on this y-axis is your confidence that goes up. And going out on the x-axis is the competence. And so if you learn something new, like tiling or whatever, you can go up and you have a high peak of confidence. And this is not my term. This is the sociologist's term. This is the psychiatrist's term. When you're on that peak right there of a lot of confidence but low competence, they call that the peak of Mount Stupid. Not my word. Not my word. That's the official professional. That's what they call it. You're on the peak of Mount Stupid. So you're doing your drywalling, and you're on the peak. And then you look at it, and inevitably, what happens? You realize you don't know what you're doing. And what comes next is a big fall, right? And you get down into what they call the valley of despair, right? Your confidence now is in the trash can. It's in the gutter. It's not, you can't even see the confidence anymore. You're like, I can't do anything right. Like, I might as well just give up. I'm never going to be able to do this. And then we'll see, and after you kind of work yourself out, you can gradually go up this, what they call the slope of enlightenment, where you start training and you start gaining in competence. And as you slowly gain in competence, you eventually come to a place what they call the plateau of sustainability, where your confidence and your competence is finally matching at a higher level. So let's look at this first phase, right? Moses, he grew up in the palace of Egypt, right? First 40 years, which means he grew up in comfort. He grew up with privilege. But also, there was a tension there because Moses wasn't Egyptian. And he stood out, right? He didn't look Egyptian, he was a Hebrew. He probably spoke differently than the other Egyptians living in the palace. He didn't fit in. The palace was never quite his home. He didn't belong. He knew he was a Hebrew, even though he was living in comfort and all the niceties of life, all these nice, great things. But then he would see the injustices that the Egyptian people committed against his fellow Hebrews. And that stirred something in him, right? It was wrong. And he had a passion for trying to fix this wrong. And so it says he was out, kind of visiting his fellow Hebrews. And he saw the injustices being committed. Now, clearly, Moses had a high level of confidence, right? He thought he was going to be the people's hero. He thought he knew how to handle this. So what I'm going to look around, make sure no one's looking. And they're going to go and kill this Egyptian and hide his body in the sand. Not once did he turn to God to seek his guidance. He assumed he knew what to do, which is why we can call this phase the stage of presumption. He presumed he knew what to do. He presumed he knew what the right thing was. He presumed he knew what the people needed from him. And he acted on these presumptions. And of course, these actions led to a great sin. He killed a man. This is not good. This is not how God rescues people. In Acts chapter 7, we find more insight into this as Stephen, one of the disciples who became the first martyr, he's kind of given this testimony. He's given this overview of the Old Testament. And he describes this about Moses. He says, when Moses was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his relatives, the Israelites. When he saw one of them being wronged, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him by striking down the Egyptian. Now listen to this. He supposed that his kinsfolk would understand that God, through him, was rescuing them. But they did not. He presumed that they would understand, guys, I'm helping. But of course, he did more harm than good. Pharaoh found out about it. It was no longer a secret, and he had to go on the run for his life. Moses, his first attempt at serving God was a complete failure. And he loses everything. He goes from having everything to having nothing. He goes from being a prince, and as we'll see later in chapter 3, to being a shepherd. Right? Big demotion. From having security to being a refugee. Welcome to the valley of despair. But it is in this valley, or maybe more accurately here in this desert, here in Midian, that Moses finds everything he needs to rebuild not only his confidence, but also his competence. And to truly fill out his calling. We didn't read it, but in chapter 2, when Moses flees to Midian, he sits by a well. And while he's there, these daughters of the priests of Midian they're out taking care of the sheep. They're the shepherds, and they're trying to water the sheep at this well when other shepherds come along and harass them, kind of force them to leave. And Moses, seeing this, we can already tell Moses has a deep sense of justice. He sees this injustice taking place, and he intervenes. And and this is really a remarkable thing. Moses, just one guy, chases off the rest of these shepherds, and then waters the flocks for these daughters of the priests of Midian. And when that happens, the daughters go back home, and the father is like, "Why are you back so early?" Because apparently this was a regular thing. And the daughters replied, "Well, there was this Egyptian," they call him an Egyptian because they don't know who he is. Says, "This Egyptian helped us today. He chased off the other shepherds, and he helped us water our flock." And so the man is moved. He invites Moses into his house. They have dinner. He ends up offering one of his daughters to Moses in marriage. They get married. They have a son. And Moses finds a home in quite an unexpected place. This is the first thing Moses finds in this desert, is he finds belonging. Back in Egypt, the Egyptians wanted him dead. The Hebrews rejected him as their leader. He had no place, but here in Midian, in this desert land, he found a home. He found a family. And not only that, he found a people who worship God. This is, I think, something that can be easy to skip over. We just read, there was this guy who was the priest of Midian. They worshiped God like it was no big deal. But all of God's people are slaves in Egypt. They have no freedom. But here in this wilderness place, he finds this small group of people that have freedom to worship God. He finds the freedom in worship. And he even gets a job. Now he's a shepherd of his father-in-law's sheep. Now certainly it's a demotion from his title as prince, but remember, now he's in the phase of preparation. And being a shepherd to this flock will play a crucial role in preparing him for shepherding the people of God. God is preparing him. This is where the real training begins. So hopefully this brings encouragement to some of you if you find yourself in the valley of despair. For in this valley or in this desert, whatever metaphor you want to use, that in God's hands, it will be used to prepare you for something greater. In chapter 3, we read this, verses 1 through 6. It tells us this. It says, Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness, and he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, and yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight, and why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, and he was afraid to look at God. Verse 9, it says, continues, The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He said, I will be with you, and this shall be a sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. But Moses said to God, If I come to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said further, Thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Thus you shall say to the Israelites, The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name, and this is my title for all generations. Now this is a big text. And there's a lot we could discuss and learn from this, but I want to focus our attention on the two questions that are asked and then answered. There are two questions Moses asks and God answers. God has just appeared to Moses, directly speaking to him. He sees in the burning bush that burns but is not consumed. And we call this a theophany, right? Where God appears directly to someone. Right? This is one of the powerful theophanies of the Old Testament. God appearing to Moses and calling to him. And God calls him to be the leader Moses has always wanted to be. I'm calling you to be the leader you wanted to be 40 years ago. The leader you tried but failed to be. And Moses' response isn't, sweet, I've been waiting my whole life for this, let's do it. His response is, who am I that I should go? Who am I? That's the first question. We see a change in Moses here, don't we? In chapter 2, Moses was bold. He was assertive. He was arrogant. He was full of pride. He was entitled. He saw something happening. He said, I'm going to be the leader and I'm going to do something about it. He didn't ask questions about what he should or shouldn't do. He just went for it. Ambition. But now, Moses, in this valley of despair and this time of preparation, we find him humble and meek. He's curious instead of judgmental. And he's humbled by the presence of God in this burning bush. There's been a transformation in Moses' life. Some for the better, maybe some for the worse. Yes, he's more humble, he's more curious, but he also lacks self-confidence. He's unsure of himself. And this makes sense because his failure was so big and the impact was so radical that he probably has a deep fear of failure again. He doesn't want to go through that again. If you ever failed big time, it shakes you. If you're given an opportunity again, maybe you're more apprehensive. This is a big ask God is asking Moses after a huge failure. Can you imagine this? I mean, no wonder he's reluctant. But his encounters with God here and elsewhere, as we'll see, will begin to shape Moses' character, building upon the things that have been good in this transformation and renewing the things that have been damaged. This is what time with God does. And sometimes the progress up that slope of enlightenment, or whatever we want to call it, means that going back and facing past failures is the way to move on. Moses asks, who am I that I should go? And I love that God sort of just sidesteps that question altogether. Did you notice that? He didn't even answer the question. He didn't say, oh, Moses, don't beat yourself up. You're so great. You can do this. He didn't say any of that. Moses says, who am I that I should go? And God says, I will be with you. It's not about Moses and what he can do. It's about God. Who he is. What he can do. It's not about Moses having more self-confidence. It's about Moses having confidence in God. It's not about Moses' competence. It's about knowing that God has all the competence. The question, who am I that I should go, that doesn't matter. I am the Lord. I will be with you. That's all that matters. The focus shifts. But if you don't know God very well, then the next question might come rather naturally. Well, then who are you? Moses asks, God, if you're going to send me to this people, they're going to ask, who sent you? Who should I tell them sent me? Who are you as you're sending me? And God, for the first time, reveals his divine name here in Exodus 3. I am who I am. And this, our English tries its best, but it's like the one who is and is ising, who always has been, is, and is now and always will. It just is. You are. I am. Right? We do our best, but it's like this, our brains and our language have a hard time like making sense of this sometimes, right? I am has sent you, the one who just is. And this is important theologically, it's important to the identity of God, because this is probably not a name that the Hebrews are going to recognize. We know people by our names, right? My name is Matt Bohannon, right? My name comes from my family. I belong to that family. That's where I came from. Your name suggests something about where you came from, your origins. The Egyptians had all of these gods, and the Hebrews would have known all of these gods and probably worshipped many of these gods. And they had a god, right, of the sun. And there was a god of the moon, god of the sea, and the land, and fertility, and all these different things. The gods were attached to a certain thing, and so God shows up, and he says, no, that's not how I work. I'm not attached to any one thing. I didn't come from anywhere. You can't track my origin or put me in a box. I just am. And that is it. I am beyond all of this and within all of this. Whereas John tells us that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Nothing came into being without the Word. This is very metaphysical sort of things that our brain is trying to reconcile with this nature of God being the one who is. But it is this one that is with us as we are facing our valley of despair, even as we are on the top of Mount Stupid. It is this God who is with us. And it is not our own confidence that we put our trust in. It is not our competence that we rely on, but we are called to rely on the one who is. He is the only one who has the power to rescue us, to redeem Moses' character, to redeem his soul, to redeem the larger people of Israel, and to redeem you and to redeem me. It is the greater Moses that we rely on. It is Christ. He is the strength. He is the rock. He is the one we rely on. And He will be the one who leads us as we carry our cross up the slope so we can be sustainable. So we can leave Mount Stupid. We can leave the valley of despair. And we can live with confidence in the one who guides us. Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for who you are. And God, our words fail to describe you. But we know that you are. And that you are here. And you are with us. So when we lack confidence in ourselves, may we never forget who you are. When we face failures of many kinds, may we know that it is you who can take our failures and transform them for your glory. So God, we place ourselves in your hands. In faith, we hear your call and we follow. It's the name of your Son, Jesus, we pray and we seek you.